IVM.
Welcome to Think Fast, where it has finally been proven that there might be a Taylor Swift, but there is always an Alka Yagnik to beat her as becoming
Oh my God.
the most
You're
streamed
kicking
singer in the
off
world
the
is
episode with
Alka
this.
Yagnik, not Taylor Swift, not BTS.
Oh
Alka
my
rocks.
God.
Alka rocks.
Alka
That's how we
rocks.
start this episode. Alka rocks. That's
Asha,
how
what's
we
your
start
favorite
this
Alka
episode.
song? Tell me.
Dil mar ki yaar se dil par ka.
What are you singing? You can just give me the name of the song.
No, I don't know the name of the song. I know the song. It's in my heart. It's coming
Oh my
out.
God. It's in your heart. You sound like you just inhaled a whole helium balloon, but let's keep that aside for a second.
But that aside, what else is up? We have an interesting episode today. We have a guest after a very, very, very long time. Anupam Gupta is coming on to discuss the budget, discuss the whole Adani scene that's happening. Also dropping in some interesting recommendation bombs at the end of it. But before we get into that, we'll do a quick run through of all of what has happened this week. Guys, Pathan's just made over 833 crores. Shah Rukh Khan rocks.
Of which
Alka
Varun
rocks. Shah Rukh rocks.
For
many
which
rocks.
Varun has contributed only 700 crores by buying tickets for every single show in every single theatre all across the country.
Yes.
But is it worth it? Should I drag my ass to a PVR
Please drag
near
your
me
ass.
to watch this?
It's go with the mindset that you are going there to just have fun. Like whistle,
Okay.
clap, that kind of fun. Don't think it's going to have any form of logic or it's not deep cinema. It's just fun cinema.
Got it. I will do
Yes.
it for SRK. I'm a big fan of the man.
Yes. What else has happened? What else has happened this week? It's a bit of a lean weeks kind of continue apart from obviously the Adani conversation that's gone on.
Apart from the Adani conversation, oh my God, Varun, like look at how nonchalantly you put it out there. That is
because
big
you're
news.
getting into it anyway in some time.
Achha,
So that's
fair,
why.
fine. Yes, keeping that aside. No, but it's been an interesting week, man. Shein has cut its own valuation. I don't know if you saw this, but I actually found this to be fairly interesting. Again, better to correct yourself than be corrected by someone else, which is a lesson Mr. Adani should have learned. I don't know if I'm going to get into trouble for that. Please don't come after me, anyone. But the second one was interesting. Viacom to merge Jio Cinema and Voot ahead of IPL. What are your thoughts on this, man?
It makes sense because I think Voot's kind of been like around saying what is Voot if Jio Cinema is the main platform for a bit. This is bound to happen. I'm interested to see what they call it because calling it Jio Cinema when you have sports, when you have everything else doesn't really ring true. So I don't know if they'll brand it as something else. I'm not sure if they've announced that part of it, but it makes sense to merge them because Voot anyway hasn't been a big player in the space for a while. Viacom tried for a while to kind of grow it, but never really scaled that up. So it makes sense. Consolidate under one brand name and really go deep into that. It's also learning that you have in the US, for instance, Disney Plus, where they haven't taken Hulu under it and kept it separate. But here I'm guessing it makes sense because Jio is going after the mass market, especially with the IPL. You'd rather bring also the teams together. Don't operate two different teams in this sense. So I think it makes perfect sense, especially the IPL coming up, and it's going to be interesting. I'm also looking forward to the women's IPL later, and that was actually an interesting piece of news as well, right? You had Adani Sportsline actually bought the Ahmedabad women's IPL franchise for 1,289 crores. He's continuing his expansion into all things, and also can be like long, not slow clap, but like big clap for India's under-19 T20 team, which beat England to win the under-19 T20 World Cup. It was really nice to see. And if you see the game, you can see how much women's cricket has become more of a spectacle to watch.
You saw the match?
I saw the highlights, and it was so much fun to watch.
That's awesome, man. And that's good to see.
Yeah. What else happened? You share your Netflix passwords? Do you?
I don't. No, I do steal my husband's password. But by the way, Netflix has had, I know you're going to read out this Netflix plans on stopping shared accounts and passwords story. But dude, kick-ass performance, man. Like everyone's quarterly results. Meta had a, ginormous everyone keeps writing off Facebook, but Facebook has 2 billion, what is it, monthly active users, daily active, yeah, basically it has 2 billion monthly active users or some such insanely gigantic amount of user base. That's insane. That's basically like 1 in every 4 people, 3.5 people on this planet use Facebook. And circling back to this Netflix story, even Netflix had a good quarter. Their strategy really seems to be paying off.
Yeah, and there's an interesting sub story just in terms of how they're reorganizing everything under there. There's even who's running content after Ted Sarando's taken on, and there's been a lot of articles on her, Bella Bajaria. It's interesting to see how she's kind of come in and how they kind of remapping how this functions. Where they're going after it in very TV network way. And that kind of makes sense considering Netflix is like TV more than it being like a cinema app in that sense, just in terms of consumption habits that people have. So it's interesting to see how they're evolving. I mean, the important thing to see is how they can continue to grow, especially once this starts saturating. And I'm very interested to see how their ad part really kind of grows. But also people are venting about the fact that they are not letting people share passwords. But I'm like, come on, guys. Like at some point, you knew this was going to go.
Paise banane do.
Exactly.
But I don't know if you saw this Sephora and Reliance have called off their retail deal. There was a lot of excitement around all things Sephora, Reliance and their beauty platform called Tiara. But apparently the deal is off and the Frenchies are going to continue operating by themselves. I think they're under the Arvind Group right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Not sure.
But this deal's off, man.
That's interesting though. There's no reason kind of given as to why it happened is what I'm gathering. But it is Arvind Fashions in that sense. If you look reading through the article, it says Arvind Fashions is the one who helping them operate it. It's interesting to see, but maybe good to kind of dig in deeper and see if we can actually find out what kind of happened behind the scenes. I'm sure someone's going to do an article about it. So we will run through that and maybe bring that back in a future episode. But apart from that, the Instagram founders have launched a new app. Kevin Systrom and I forget the other co-founder's name, Mike Krieger. They're building an AI-driven news app, which is a mix of TikTok meets Twitter. And they're saying that they're doing it to tackle misinformation. Found it a little weird in my head to understand how this could work, because considering Twitter by itself and even like news hasn't been the most, enticing, areas to focus on to grow. It's interesting they would pick this and not go after, let's say, video or like AI this is AI driven, but it's still, this feels like a interesting detour for them to take from what they do with Instagram.
Yes. I think it's one of those things where Kevin Systrom is one of those founders that I would never undermine. Do you know what I mean? And given that the product hasn't come out yet, it's interesting to see, what they launch with. And I feel like if you're launching anything in media, news is generally a pretty good category to start with because it's the fastest category for customer acquisition. So let's see what it becomes. But good category to cheaply acquire consumers and, hopefully build something massive. That said, at hindsight, can you imagine how and hindsight is 2020, but the deal at which Facebook bought Instagram and what it's worth today, it's insane. Arguably one of the best media deals ever. And arguably one could say that they wouldn't have become this big had it not been for Facebook and their, crazy monetization capabilities. But enough on that.
Remember when Instagram was there was, Hipstagram? Instagram. There's one more thing. There were a few of these apps which were there at that time. And Instagram was one of those which went towards a social network. Everybody else was just camera apps. So it's interesting what could have happened to some of those. There's Visco, which kind of came back into vogue in recent times with Gen Z. But what else? Australia is removing the British monarchy from banknotes. So King Charles is not going to be on any new notes.
The Prince Harry campaign seems to really be working, it seems.
I don't know if it's Prince Harry campaign or the Australians finally saying, can we just put actual people from Australia on the notes? And I think it's a good thing to do. I don't give Harry too much credit in life. I feel... it is a point beyond which I'm like, okay, fine, Harry, I've had enough.
What is wrong with you? I love Harry and Meghan.
I don't like Harry.
What a endless provider of gossip and fodder. I live for this shit, man. This is the only distraction I have in my life. What are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle up to?
Fine. But speaking of what are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle up to, we will which has no connection to what I'm going to say. We are going to dig into the budget and Mr. Adani. But before I do that and get Anupam in and go deep into all that stuff, we need to take a break. For Jalasmi tells us that it's going to be a really long episode, which we are both saying it might actually be a very long episode. But guys, just saying, Alka rocks. That's all I can say before we go to break. Alka rocks. What happened, Swifty?
Watch it, Varun. Watch it. Did she win any Grammys, by the way?
Alka don't need no Grammys.
Abhi, yaar, I'm talking about... Okay, bye, Varun. I'll see you on the other side of this break. Jesus.
Welcome back to Think Fast, because we both duffers about what budgets read like and anything to do with any form of finance. Although we both claim to be very well read about this stuff, we thought we'll, for a change, not claim to be fraud experts in spaces where we are fraud experts in, and we actually got a genuine expert in. Anupam, welcome to the show. Just like few notes here, we say whatever we want to say. So you got to add in the weight to this part of the conversation. I'm speaking about myself more than Suchita. I'm going to let her fill in about her contribution to this.
I am just here to listen, guys. I'm here to listen and absorb and learn from Mr. Anupam himself.
Oh my God.
Bones.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be part of this, because you guys, both of you, my fellow author over here, Varun, I think your book was also Penguin, right?
Yeah, mine was Penguin as well.
Yeah, so shout out to the Penguin guys, for supporting authors like Varun and myself. And little, LBB, come on, Sujata, big fan. So I'm really glad to be here.
Lovely. I'm happy that I finally have an intellectual guest and co-host on
Don't
this.
call me Don't call me. Don't call me
Usually I'm
intellectual.
stuck with Varun, but it's great that you're here. But let's jump in, man. Obviously, neither, like Varun said, both of us know a lot of things, but we definitely don't know anything about the budget. So, Varun, should we kick off with maybe a quick TLDR from Anupam on what happened in this budget and where are we going as a country and as a nation?
Okay, right. So I think this was actually a very sober and sensible budget, considering the fact that this was the last one before we go into the elections next year. And there's always that fear, right? I mean, we had the same fear back in 2018 when the 2019 elections were due, etc., 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 so that the government could be expansionist and, announce abolition of income tax. Didn't happen, by the way. Or, making freelancer income tax free. How about, for the three of us? But none of that happened. So I think that is the one very good thing. So here's the thing about the government finances. We spend more than we earn. Okay, so that's the very basic construct. And anyone who's spending more than he earns is obviously going to need debt. Otherwise, how else will you, So those are the three main things that a budget, whether it's yours, mine, or anybody's, operates within. You've got revenue, you've got expenses, and then you've got debt. So India for a very long time we've always had this thing called the fiscal deficit, which is just a fancy term for जो ज़्यादा खर्चा होता है उसका पैसा कहाँ से लाए हम लोग. So you don't want to freak out, because then you become like the Western countries where they're literally printing money, and now they're dealing with the consequences of that. We've been more sober. We've been more sober. We've been more straight, and we're saying that, listen, whatever is a little bit on the higher side for the fiscal deficit, we got to rein that in. So this budget did a very good job of that. So that's the first thing. If you look at the other things, I mean, everybody now knows that India is the biggest story on the planet. Okay, you have conversations with your friends, anybody who's from abroad or anywhere in the air, anywhere you read, people are like, oh, wow, and all that. In December, when you've got all these NRIs visiting this time around, they were freaked out, right? Because after 3 years, they're coming in and they're like, oh my God, look at UPI. Oh my God, look at it. There are long threads everywhere. So India is this big growth story. We've had like 1.5 billion people with a per capita income of, just about $3,000, growing at 7-8%. No other country does that. Now, how do you ensure that growth stays on track? And this budget, I think, does a very, very good job of ensuring that by they're doing capex, so that's a way to make the economy grow. And any of you guys who've traveled, you go to a railway station, you go to an airport, all you can see is crowds, and crowds. So how do you need more infra, and this government has done a very good job of that. 33% increase over last year on the capex spend. So that's the good news. And of course, what we call subsidy, which is basically paying for stuff that we provide free. Like during the pandemic, this government gave a lot of food grains, which was really required for a lot of people. I believe it's about 80 crore people in India are getting these free food grains, which is very much required. They're kind of controlling that in. knowing that this is just expenditure at some point of time, since the pandemic is over and the economy is kind of going back, we need to let the economy grow on its own. That's also a good thing, So that's the food subsidy that's come in. The fertilizer subsidy has come in. So that's the slightly more top-down picture that we say government needs to support this growth that we are seeing. And then, of course, stuff that affects all of us directly. That's GST and income tax. GST honestly has moved out of the budget. Back in the old days when customs and excise used to be part of the budget, you'll have the finance minister talk a lot about that. We've reduced excise duty on mobile phones and this and that. All of that action has now moved to the GST. Okay, when that is controlled by the GST Council, and those meetings happen every month or whatever it is. What's left is the income tax, which you, me, all of us wait for. And there, honestly, come on, I can't recall the last time that we had a slab hike. Slab hike is, raising the minimum income from 5 lakhs to 7 lakhs. I'll come to the new old regime in a bit. So that's obviously good news. Okay. And so that slab increase itself is about 35,000 crores, which is a big amount for the budget, and it will benefit everybody directly. Okay. And then honestly, the rest is not really a big deal. There's a lot of stuff. One thing that caught my eye was about how they want to tax outgoing. Like if you are abroad and you spend, if you're on a foreign vacation now, there's apparently a 20% tax collection at source, which is basically an extra expense for you upfront. You get to claim it later on in the year when you file your return from your tax return. It's a massive pain, but it's the government. What can you do? My guess is they know that the Indians are spending a lot on overseas stuff. They're just trying to take a tax from there, and that's fine. So that was there. Nothing on capital gains, thankfully. So that's also good news. So these are the small things here and there. And finally, this whole new regime and old regime. I don't know when you guys have filed your tax returns, but when I did it last year, for example, my chartered accountant told me that it makes sense for you to do the new regime. Now, what is the new regime? The new regime says, "Dekho bhai, dump all these exemptions. Okay, medical insurance, health insurance, donation, X, Y, Z. There's a long list." Anyone who's filed a tax return knows that they've got to do a lot of work on this exemption
petrol bill, all that random stuff which comes in.
That's what I'm talking about, So, and that also supports a very big industry of fake bills and all that. I think, okay, forget that, let's remove all of that and let's lower the tax rate, right? Because these things, the exemptions effectively lower the tax rate, right? I mean, so let's have a new tax regime. And this actually goes back like 10, 15 years to what is called the direct tax code, where that's what the original plan was. Remove all the exemptions. And let people be transparent. You earn this, you pay this, baat khatam. You go on, claiming exemptions and this and that. So that's what the new tax regime is about. But obviously, it's a massive change. For a lot of us, investing in PPF, NPS, paying this is also done from a tax angle. So you can't wake up on fine day and say, let's just move to this regime. So that's why the old regime also exists, where they say, okay, you claim all of this as expenditure, but you pay a slightly higher tax. So all the goodies, like for the super rich, for example, in this budget, they've reduced the peak tax rate from 43% to 39%, only for the new tax regime. So it's like the government signal of saying, listen, guys, we're on this. And we think it's probably a good idea for you to get used to this new tax regime, because over the longer term, that's the direction that we will eventually take. So
you only
I think
have one
that's
regime eventually.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, this is a very different country from when these were originally thought of back in the day, when you needed to support certain ventures, and now a lot of places are big enough, grown up enough for them to take care of themselves. And this, it's like, Varun, right? So many of us, when you go out for a lunch or a dinner or a party, people say, "Yaar, mujhe bill de de." I want to claim it, and I want to claim medical bills, and I want to claim fuel bills and all that. That's kind of done now. Ho gaya yaar. Aage chalo life. So I'm sorry for that very long answer, but yeah.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I have a few things which I noticed beyond this, which I have questions on and stuff basis what you said as well. Suchita, do you want to go or I'll go with you?
Yeah. So just one quick follow-on question, right? Obviously, the star of this show seems to be Mr. Nitin Gadkari, whose, sort of like mandate has seen consistent increment from a spends perspective. What's the big picture here? Is it, manufacturing as the sort of last domino with respect to infrastructure investments? Is it intercity connectivity? Is it, migration? Like, do you know what I mean? Like what really is the government? Obviously, the logical assessment is that, invest in infrastructure, that those are foundations on which any country or economy can grow. But I wonder who is the biggest benefactor of infrastructure investments that aren't the obvious ones that, you and I can see.
Wonderful point. I want to unpack two things out here. There's infrastructure and there's public and there's private. And the infrastructure private is going to play on to the Adani thing, which, I'm guessing we're going to talk about. But if we just focus on the infrastructure on the public part, go back 20 years, right? Around about 2002 types, when the Golden Quadrilateral and the North, South, East, West corridor was developed. You had massive transformation. And any country on this planet, whenever they invest in roads, will see a huge transformation that happens over a period of time. And similarly, the same story goes across for metros. So when you talk about infrastructure, you're talking basically about transport. You're talking about the basics. You're talking about what they say, bijli, sadak, pani, that kind of stuff. That the government has to do. Okay, that is their mandate. And there are two types out here. You've got the central government, which does an all India thing, and then you've got the state government. Like in the best example is Bombay. I always think about this, right? Because if you look at the Versova and Andheri Ghatkopar metro, that took like years and years. There were court cases and there were X and there was Y and there was that. And finally, just before the 2009 elections, I think is when it was fine. I think I can't recall when exactly it was finally made. But it had a very long track record of becoming, it just went into a different loop. I think it was around about 2013, 2014. And that I think is just 14 kilometers. And now look at what's happening in Bombay since 2016. In 6 years, this city will see more metro lines laid than probably the history of a city. And that is a central driven thing. It's center plus state. So you've got the central government plus you've got MMRDA. So it's like a combination of both of them working towards this. And the metro is going to change Bombay. Of course, it's cost us a lot. For 6 years, we've been, but that's the price you pay. Calcutta got its metro in the 1980s. Delhi got its metro in 2001. Okay, but these were also cities that didn't have a very, they didn't have a robust internal transport like Bombay has. That Bombay's locals anybody who's traveled on them knows that when it comes to getting from point A to point B, you cannot beat the trains in Bombay for time immemorial. I mean, they're just so efficient. Of course, they're also, severely crowded, which is why we've always needed infrastructure, but we never got it. So, Suchita, that's it, So, when you've got infra and you've got the center, that's a lot of heavy lifting that they have to do. Same goes for electricity, same goes for sanitation, same goes for water. And in the last 10 years, India's villages have seen phenomenal progress on basic amenities, which eluded them for a long period of time for whatever reason. You remember that those NASA Diwali jokes, right? There used to be this joke about NASA's pictures of India during Diwali.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be a joke maybe 4-5 years ago, but today we are lit. I mean, we are like literally lit.
Entirely,
Yeah, and I'm talking about the smaller. See, so India is massive in terms of what they call Bharat and India. I mean, we stay in metro cities, so our outlook is very different. But if you go to the smaller towns and cities and all, they've wanted this for a very long time. So sanitation, electricity, roads, all of that is happening now. And that's got to be supported by government expenditure. So that takes care of the infra public part. I hope that I've answered, your question. That should continue. And I'm glad that it is continuing with this 33% increase from the center. Very small mention I'll put in state budget, because that normally no one really cares about. The state budget, civic budgets. Like Bombay had its budget this weekend.
BMC budget, right?
$8 billion. Massive amount. So all of that is also happening. So our lives are kind of shaped with, some amount of civic spend, some amount of state spend.
Also have to call out the logic of that air purifier towers being put up in all the major cities. That is like, I know Delhi's had that for a while, but
doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's it, So that it's good to see that's continuing. And I think we've also moved to a phase now where this, without going into any political debate, we know that the world is looking at us. Okay, which is again also why the Adani thing, became such a big thing for the last 10 years. And we've kind of, this political dispensation or whoever it is at the top believes that now India is going to like really stand up and we need to mean something for the world. That's in the form of the G20 that you saw. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like before where you could just say ki chalo, cows are roaming around on the road, big deal. Now it's like, okay, guys, now we got to really get our act together, because for whatever the world is looking at, I think the last time we got this much attention, mid-90s, Varun, Suchita Sen and Aishwarya, right? I think
fair
after
point,
that,
fair point.
yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. But obviously now we've transition. We've got 3 people. We've got 3 entries in the Oscars. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to. I'm damn sure we're going to win at least one. I hope it's for the Elephant Whisperers, but hey, I wouldn't mind if Natu Natu also gets it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
The other things I noticed, and there were smaller things, right? One is there's been a lot of, I think the investor community on the startup front has that angel tax coming on, that extension of it, which is a little grey. I don't think there's a full read on it, but if a foreign investor is investing into an Indian unlisted startup, then they get taxed. There's a tax involved as well, which they didn't have till now. So it's almost like that angel tax thing, which was anyway something people didn't really get as much, has gotten expanded. So there's been chatter around it, but they haven't clarified as much in terms of how it functions.
I haven't gone so much deep in that because honestly, the whole funding thing for startups is not something that I track actively. And I've also seen that, once the US kind of tightened the tap on liquidity, everybody kind of had their ships shake out here in terms of valuations. But hey, Shark Tank season 2 is back. So I'm sure
without
winter is over.
Without Ashneer Grover.
Without him. And I think the difference is showing.
Yeah. It feels very. We've discussed Shark Tank a lot on this show, where it feels like it's nice. It's a nice happy show now. There's no like, unfortunately, an old school reality show person. Where's the drama? Where is the infighting is where I'm always at.
Wow, what are you saying?
Nobody's getting slapped.
I don't really track it, but you're saying the drama is less this time, is it?
That's what I felt.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
My kid sees it, so I'll talk to him maybe.
The other one I noticed, which is interesting, and we were running through that point, is that the pieces that got costlier, while the usual suspects like, let's say, cigarettes and silver, gold, etc. were there, toys were taxed higher, which I found to be a very interesting category to focus on making them costly if they were manufactured out of India. Do you think it's because of what you said about the whole traveling out of India and coming back with toys, or is this more a manufacturing push?
I think this is just a fine print out there which gets adjusted up and down. If I look at it in terms of the revenues to the center, I don't think it's really going to make much of a difference.
Yeah.
This might be done just for aligning certain stuff because GST consists of slabs and all that. Maybe there was the finance minister did say that in the GST rates will be kind of rationalized because there's still some anomalies out there. I'm guessing maybe that's related to that, but honestly, I haven't seen that in depth.
But it's also interesting to see that they haven't really pushed towards like large SOPs on a pre-election budget, right? I think the one thing which caught my eye, which is I'd love to see it done because it's important, is basically pushing urban planning and like moving manholes to machine hole mode, which is
So like, if you look at it, those small things plus the outlays are great to say. I just hope they get implemented.
Exactly.
There's a lot of stuff out there that never gets implemented. And Suchita, come on, you've got 2 lakhs at 7.5% for 2 years. I would grab that with both my hands.
Amen. I have a quick follow-on question. Actually, can we move into Adani? Because I'm here for the gossip, guys. I'm here for the gossip.
So are we done with budget?
I don't know. You guys tell me.
So, and we can get back to the budget in just a bit, but let's jump into the man of the hour, who is not Varun. It's not Anupam. It is Mr. Adani. What is going on over here for those of us who have had a torturous week at work last week and haven't had the mind space to really jump into all of his woes? So, can you give us a TLDR on what really is going on here?
Yeah, well, I hope that we are not going into the conspiracy theory area because there's a whole another sub-thread happening out there about...
I was going to go all the way there,
So
but I'll hold myself back.
Did you note? Aap chronology samajhiye. First you've got the BBC thing happening.
Yeah.
Then you've got this happening. Then of course Pathaan became a super hit. Of course, there's a link between all. Come on, guys.
If we go down that rabbit hole, then we are just going to go down a weird rabbit hole.
I'm not sure whether there's a link between Pathaan and Hindenburg research. Much as I would love, I don't know if Sid Anand is listening to this and he wants to do another movie on that in the YRF spy universe. But jokes apart. So see, here's the thing, oh boy, where do I start? First, there's of course the main character that triggered this entire thing. Without them, of course, this would not even happen. Hindenburg Research, Nathan Anderson, these are guys who short sell. And that's a pretty legit way of earning money in the US. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's how free markets operate. If you can buy, you can sell. All of that is fine. And they are what's called activist short sellers, which is they target groups and companies of businesses which they know that there is some shady stuff happening out there, and they're vocal. They'll put their reports out there. They like to make shock and awe. as someone, coming from the US where they've got this entire thing of freedom of expression, free markets and all that, for them it's very normal. For us, भाई क्या बोल रहा है तुम यार? Biggest con job in the history, मतलब दिल पे लग गया अपने को यार, come on, and that also him. So obviously that to us has felt like, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But just look at it, these guys have just been growing, and there have been enough red flags raised within India over the last, I would say, easily over the last 4-5 years. Okay, a lot of it obviously was slipped under the carpet because there was nobody really had that enthusiasm in life to do an in-depth investigation. Okay, and B, because come on, honestly, to take on someone that big, you need to have industrial sized up. You know what I'm saying? So given that kind of background, look at it this way, right? I mean, this is a person. This is Adani Enterprises. It's up some 30 times, or I don't know, some crazy number over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And if you look at the underlying numbers, see, stock markets operate on two things: earnings and liquidity. As long as a company shows earning, and as long as there's money in the market, the stock price will go up, or the reverse way. This guy, there's not been any spectacular profit growth. Sure, there's been a lot of revenue growth, but even that's kind of here or there. And liquidity. So that's what differentiates Adani with, say, what's called liquid stocks like Reliance. Now, when I say liquidity, what does that mean? That just means there's a lot of shares that people can buy and sell. When you say that you want to buy 100 shares of Reliance, there's someone who's willing to sell you 100 shares of Reliance, no problem. So the price doesn't get really that impacted. That's what liquidity is. So when you say you want to buy 1 crore share of Reliance, okay, you got to sell a 1 crore and the order is matched, boom. But when someone comes in and puts in a big order for Adani shares, there's just not so much out there. So that's called illiquidity.
He owns 70%, right? 73% is what they own.
Something like that, yeah. Something like that. Think of it like, like real estate. Real estate is really illiquid, and that's why you don't see such spectacular ups and downs in house prices. Yeah. So you have earnings and you have liquidity, and both weren't ever clear in case of Adani. Okay, now all of that is background. Now let's move to Hindenburg. Hindenburg, there were, I think, 2 or 3, which again, like you said, Suchita, we were talking about before the show started. Anyone listening on the show really wants to get a very clear, crisp, and really in-depth understanding, please go to Aswath Damodaran's blog. It's called Musings on Market, and he's done a fantastic job in explaining how this entire thing works and the 3 broad areas. Everything about Adani comes down to a couple of things. One is shell companies, okay, and how these shell companies essentially did transactions with Adani to inflate revenues, use those revenues to get loans, use those loans to grow. Okay, so that's kind of a, now whether you call it round tripping or whatever, that's really at the center of all this. And shell companies are essentially opaque. They'll be registered in some tax-friendly place, Mauritius, Caymans and all that. You won't really know who's behind them. Okay, and then it's like, say the 3 of us decide to do shell companies. I would raise an invoice on Suchita, but there's nothing out there. It's a fake invoice. You raise on Varun then sells it to me. So we've literally created about, say 100 rupees of stuff that does not exist. Now I take that 100 rupees of invoice, go to a bank and say, give me a 50 rupee loan on that. They'll say, yeah, of course, here's the invoice. They'll do some amount of due diligence, but there's a way to crack the system. That's what Hindenburg is alleging. That this entire edifice that has been built on the basis of stock price manipulation used to get debt based on revenues that do not exist. Okay, now obviously they've gone for a lot of shock and awe, because now this gets me back to this gets me back to infra private. We were talking about infra public. Now this is infra private. I can't think of any company or any business group in India that has the kind of plans that Adani has, whether it is ports, whether it is logistics, whether it's energy, whether it's whatever. That is very different from taking on a Facebook. It's very different from taking on a tech company. These guys have been in business for a long time and they're very well established and they know their stuff. Yeah? You can't just, if it's like that famous saying from The Wire, right? You come at the king, you better not miss. That's, so they're coming with all of this, okay? And they're throwing a lot of things in the air. I think Damodaran made a great point on that in his post also. And they're hoping that some of it will stick. Let's see. So this entire thing is playing out. That is the drama which happened on the research report. Now there's a drama that happened in the stock markets. That, of course, ape shit crazy. But it's like what works for you on the way up screws you on the way down. And that's what you're seeing. You had the follow public offer, which was at, I think, 3,000 or 3,100, and stock is at 1,500 or 2,000. And obviously, he had to pull out of the FPO. So, there's a lot of drama happening. My guess is this will settle down and things will go back to normal. Now, what version of normal? I don't know. There's no way on God's earth you can ever stop this guy. He's not going to vanish. This is not a Satyam. This is not, this is not a scamster. At all. No way. I mean, there's some serious investments happening out here. Serious scale
and
happening
not just
out
in
here.
India.
Not just in India. Yeah. India is the bulk of it. If you look at the stuff that he's got in Australia and all, that's a different thing. But, this is what I call a correction. Got someone who's speeding on a very high pace, hits a speed breaker. If the driver is smart and sensible, he kind of says, okay, I think that was a little bit too fast. I need to kind of settle down. So I'm sure that Mr. Adani is also learning a lot of lessons from this. And we know in the last couple of weeks, he's been going around like very chilled out. Nothing's happened. He's met the Israeli guys, and all that. So I think that it's probably a good wake-up call for a lot of Indian businesses. That if they are going to be dependent on foreign capital, then boss, you need to shape up. You need to have your stuff together, because look at what's happening in the private startup industry. Wahan bhi, some founder comes on LinkedIn, says, guys, I'm really sorry, we missed. Arey bhai, kya ho raha hai yaar? You've got big VCs. Aren't they supposed to do diligence? How did that shit happen? And then you've got these guys, So I think somewhere the message is very clear for Indian businesses. We are the fastest growing country on the planet. But other countries are also there. And everybody is smart these days. You want to hustle, you want to sham. If you're a hustler and scamster, then you'll get caught eventually. And I think that, there are enough clean businesses and honest businesses in India. Plenty of them, which for them, it's just another episode. They're going on like business as usual. So, yeah.
Do you see this also as a scenario where regulations might have some, at least to some level, regulations kind of come in? Because you've seen this happen a lot in the startup space. There's obviously a big case in the markets. And no matter what the implications and connections, I feel it might at some point bring about some rules around this.
So it's post facto, no? It's like the same thing, right? In Bollywood movies, the cops always come after the crime is over, right? So same thing out here. Regulation always moves after the stuff has happened. You look at the history of stock markets, you had the Harsham and the whole scandal in 92, and then you had some very nice scams going on. That's how the NSE came. No? They said that, listen, guys, we got to move to an electronic system, more transparency, more this, more that. Wo kiya, to fir then Ketan Parekh happened in 2001. So, scams happen, then regulation change. Because remember that in India, the stock market is still new for a lot of us. So, SEBI is going to focus more on protecting the retail investor. Again, something that Damodaran said. And we said that SEBI needs to now, kind of slightly shift its focus and be more proactive towards the companies. I don't think that's going to happen. India is a country where a middle class guy or poor guy getting conned is a very big deal. And politicians and regulators will take that much more seriously than the guy who's actually perpetuating that con. So I think that's how it's going to be.
Do you think India has a reputation problem when it comes to big business dealings across both, stakes as high as Adani as well as the startup ecosystem?
So there's the popular way and the right way. Okay. Like they say, you can either choose to be popular or you can choose to be right. If I look at it at the popular way, obviously what you're saying is right. These headlines, they seem to be coming every time. You recover from one, then you've got another, you recover from the other, you've got something else happening. But I don't think that'll stop. You'll keep on. See, whenever there is a bit of a shift in in global economics, some cockroaches will come out. This is happening because the US is tightening interest rates, and that's going to be very difficult for a lot of companies. Okay, so this thing will continue. Okay, today it's go mechanic, it'll be tomorrow it'll be someone else. You look at this, and Varun, the startup, and you guys know the startup and founder ecosystem more than me. This is something that has just happened in the last 10 years. I am someone, who's interested a lot in business history. So since I've worked in the stock markets, I just try to draw parallels to listed companies, right? Now, this set of startup companies, they got money for free. I mean, I'm just saying that in a very colloquial way because the GFC happened in 2009. The Fed made money free and you had this entire wave of money coming into India. The old timers had to build this the hard way. Dhirubhai Ambani was a petrol pump operator and everything else followed after that. He didn't have anybody saying, yep, here's 100 crores. I don't need you to make any profits. Just do whatever you want. Just show me growth. So this is a slightly new concept that's just about 10 years old. Okay. Of course, in developed markets, it's much more established and all that. So the popular way is to think that there is a pattern and India is getting a reputational risk. I don't think so. The right way to look at it is this will happen everywhere. Okay. Last year, there were 3 great series on OTT. I'll tell you. Okay. There was Super Pumped, which was on Uber. Okay.
Yeah.
There was The Graduate, which I think was on Theranos. Okay. And there was a third one.
Was it WeWork?
WeWork.
Yeah.
Look at all 3. Aren't they the same thing? Now, it's a very grey line between a venture capitalist guy pushing his very aggressive founder who's also very charismatic to do growth at any cost. I mean, look at Theranos. Yeah. This is a girl, not even, just look at the way she faked it. Okay. Same thing for Uber. Same thing for WeWork. And if the WeWork guy is back, where do you draw the line out there? And this is not, you're right. It's just that the occurrences make you believe that there is a pattern and this thing will go on forever and then what will happen to India? But I think that I look at the opportunity in this. I'm just saying that for every one company that's caught for fraud, the honest guy is going to benefit. Because people are going to finally recognize that there are people out there, and we know so many people who do it the right way. I mean, you've got an HDFC bank. You've got, so that's what I'm saying. Out for every one company that does a fraud, there are still at least 5 companies that do it sensibly.
Sure.
And the more that you've got frauds, the more investors are going to say that, dude, I got to either do a much harder job because this is India. Okay. Things might not be as transparent. So he needs to invest that much more time. Okay. And maybe over a long period of, that's how corporate governance rules happened in India. Suchita, you look at 2009 when the Satyam scandal happened. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, till then, corporate governance, nobody cared. Okay. Because, the promoters could do whatever they want with their money and that kind of stuff. Now, corporate governance is tightened. You got to report certain stuff. So what happened in the public listed companies? Probably some sobriety or something will happen for the private guys also. No? Otherwise, see, you do this growth at all cost model of what is that thing? Move fast and break things. Yeah. You're going to have this. You are going to have these consequences.
What I also feel is that while we are picking up on a Go Mechanic and everybody else right now, if this was 2021 and the way the markets were and everything else, nobody would pick up any of these things. I feel
you're so right.
It's also the global market. Whenever the global market goes down, what are the problems? When everything is shiny, everybody's getting angel investing decks in their WhatsApps. It seems to be going fine. People are putting money everywhere, and you also don't realize, and you only learn when the downturn happens. Is that, for instance, a lot of companies got funded during that time had no legit large-scale investor. A lot of them were just angels, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been on a few rounds where supposedly they were going to be a larger investor, but by the time I actually got the thing, and after I had transferred, you realize that 1 second, and because also I was early, I didn't understand how to run through things. You realize that they only spoke about the fact that they were talking to a larger investor, or what ended up happening was only angels invested. So we're so early in the startup investment space in India that I feel only when these things happen, like you said, like the cops coming later, I think is the best analogy. Rules will only happen or rather come in when you realize that rules need to be made. And we're still pretty much Wild West in that scenario. But we also come from a very tax evasive society. I mean, if I think back on the fact that we always have that. And so family businesses, traditional ones always are that way. So in my head, these are the 2 things that kind of drive this way of functioning. And we jugadu, the problem is we jugadu.
I'll just add the third part to that, Varun, because the public markets are now the final court of justice.
Yeah.
You can do this stuff as much as you want, behind closed doors. But एक बार तुम market में आ गया बस, फिर तो तुम्हारा सब खुलने वाला है.
Like the Mama prospectus that came out.
Yeah. So that
they'll be fine though. Seems like they'll be fine.
Yeah, they'll be
fine. I mean, by the same logic, someone could even argue that, well, Adani was also listed. Thing happened out there. But I'm just saying we are learning, and the pace of learning is much more now. I'm 50 years old, so I was there when, oh boy, I saw the 80s bull market, I saw Harshad Mehta, I saw Ketan Pa. So there's a certain pattern to all these kind of things. It mostly follows liquidity. When there's tons and tons of money, like Varun said, no one really cares. ठीक है यार, चोर है तो क्या हुआ? मेरे पास इतना पैसा है, invest कर दो. But once the money starts flowing out, oh boy, that's when, that kind of separates really what they call the men from the boys. So Varun, I kind of agree with you out there, 100%.
Yeah. But I have one random peeve point. They should have just let him speak in a language he's more comfortable in and not put a teleprompter in front of him the way they did. I just felt that was, he could have come in a lot stronger and I don't know, this happens a lot. I blame the Copcom guys always for this. is that let a person speak in the language they're most comfortable in and own it. And I feel that would have given a lot more confidence. But it just kind of felt like he was reading off something and he wasn't that comfortable and just didn't show right.
Be a little bit kinder. You know, these are people in their late 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
Comms aren't a really big thing for India as of now.
Yeah,
You look at it, that Mukesh Ambani's speech has now become like the equivalent of Tim Cook or Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, the AGM speech that he does.
Yeah.
Okay, it's kind of pushed a lot of other people also कि भाई now तो you need to put a public face. नहीं तो एक जमाने में तो क्या था, धीरूभाई अंबानी would hold Reliance AGMs at Wankhede or Brabon, and you'd have an entire stadium full of people. From there, now you've come here where this guy is literally standing in the middle and he's being broadcast to, I don't know, millions and millions of people. We're getting there. You know, this comms thing also, I think, will come in space. Don't expect him to be a 25-year-old smart, suave founder with
my expectation was that. My expectation was he could, I feel it's
Sorry.
bad advice.
No, you're right.
I think that's bad advice. That's what I was saying. It's not
their comms. You're right. Their Copcom needs to.
I have one question for you. One last question for you. I have so many other questions for you, which is, if you were both a retail investor as well as a entrepreneur today, what's a long game you'd encourage people to play? What should we bet on? What should we not bet on? And when I say bet on, not bet on, I don't mean literal like companies, but spaces, categories where you think there will be tremendous growth opportunities in the context of India.
Wonderful, yeah. So this is, I kind of pose a similar question to every guest on Paisa Vaisa. And one of the best answers I've got was from the White Oak guys who came in, literally the first show of Paisa Vaisa this year. I had Prashant Khemka, who's like a legendary investor. And now he set up a shop in India. And I had Ashish Somai, who used to work, he used to previously work at Motilal, and now he's out here. I asked Prashant, what's the deal here? You've been an entrepreneur and you've stayed in the US for the longest time and you've handled like billions of dollars and all that. And when he came to India, like people from outside India just gave him money. Bhai, just take my money and invest it. And he was like, well, there's some serious stuff happening out here. And this is a sentiment that I hear from a lot of the other guests, that there's a dichotomy between two things. One is the Indian economy. I have not had anybody doubting that. Boss, this is it. The next 5 years, 10 years, we are set. Okay, it's our game to lose. And mota moti, it would take someone serious talent to mess up where we are right now. Okay, there might be 1 year of 6% and 1 year of 8%, but this is probably the best time for you to set up your business, whatever it is. You'll have to, of course, work much harder. So let's separate the economy and the entrepreneurial part. I think Varun will also be able to, put in there when you look at the entrepreneurial lens. And now let's look at the investment part. The investment part, Ashish gave a great answer. He said, look at yourself in two ways. Who are you? What's the kind of time, inclination, and knowledge that you have today to spend? Okay. Are you someone who just wants to work in life, go to your job in the morning, come back, do your stuff, go home to sleep? Then please buy an index fund and buy the entire market. An NSE 500 index fund, as low as 500 or 1,000 rupees a month. Just set up an SIP and live the rest of your life. Don't even think. Okay. Now you are someone who's now grown comfortable with this and you're like, I'm hungry for more. Okay. Now let's dial up the risk thing. Now try and look out for good mutual funds, active mutual funds, and figure that out. Okay. And dial it up a little bit more. Now I want to spend 2 hours per day and I want to know the next big thing in the market. Okay, great. Start your own research. Find out the next big thing in the stock markets. Boom. So you choose what's your profile across the three. And philosophically, these are the 3 routes for you to follow. Okay, now let's come to your second question. Which sectors, honestly, right now, if I look at it, again, going by the conversations that I have with a lot of people, all of them are very gung-ho on infra. Okay, saying that infra is, if India is going to grow at 6-7%, then infra has to boom. So infra and banking are obviously 2 very big spaces to go into. Okay, instead of say IT and pharma. Okay, which did well in the last 10 years, but are kind of, thoda aage piche ho raha hai unka. So these are sector-wise what I'm talking about, large sectors. View is kind of mixed today on 2 things. One is rural demand and 2 is urban demand. Okay, because the signals are damn confusing. When you come to rural demand, you've got stuff like 2-wheeler sales have halved from 5 years ago, or probably, I don't know whether it's down 50% on the top or 40%, whatever. But that's like a proxy for demand from, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. What's happening out there? Okay. And you've got urban demand. Mercedes, Lamborghini, best sales ever. Mumbai property registration, best sales ever, blah, 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 blah. It's got to reverse. For this country to grow at some point of time, that stuff has got to reverse. Okay, so the guys, you need to actually address rural India, which has got a phenomenal population, but which is not contributing enough to the GDP. And these guys in urban India who've probably benefited from a whole lot of things. Salary increases, bonus, selling off their stake and all that. That's all kind of got to normalize outside at some point of time. So when this reversal happens, it won't happen on one fine day. It takes a slightly longer period of time. And that's why for someone who can't figure out when or where, just go and buy index fund, set up an SIP and don't mess with it for the rest of your life. So again, slightly long answer, but I hope that I've kind of answered your question. Again, going by whatever I've heard on the show with my guests, not my own gyan.
Or put your money in crypto and watch it just go away.
I wouldn't touch that, man. I wouldn't touch that.
I haven't touched it yet in that sense. But yeah, I think Anupam, we got to get you back here from time to time so you can give us a lot more TLDR on all things which we don't understand but talk like we do.
Hey, always happy to be with other podcasters. You guys are like my heroes. So
okay, so we've run through the budget, we've run through Adani's entire story, but we have some more things to run through with Anupam, but we want to take a break and come back on Think Fast. Okay, welcome back to Think Fast. We are putting Anupam on the hot seat and asking him to recommend something this week. What is your recommendation? You are one of my favorite recommenders on Twitter, so you have to recommend. What is your recommendation this week, Anupam?
Books, I would definitely say Unfiltered. That's Saurabh Mukherjee's new book. Again, disclaimer, I worked with him, so I'm kind of slightly biased with him. But Saurabh has a new book out with his coach. And I think this is probably going to be the first book that an Indian CEO has written in collaboration with his coach. Because coaching is a damn, it's abroad, so it's like the hottest thing and all that. But this is the first time I think that someone's kind of putting his experience and the coach. This is like a conversation between coach and therapist, and that'll lead me on to the next recommendation that I have. So that's my one major thing. I unfortunately am not reading too many because I'm writing my next book, and as Varun would know, it's a headache, the deadlines and all that. So
I have to start working on my second one. I have a meeting with the publisher in a few days. I'm like figuring out what I'm pitching.
Yeah, please don't, you're making me feel very uncomfortable. I'm very triggered right now because I need to have a similar conversation. So I haven't been reading too many books. Unfiltered is something that I would definitely take. That's Saurabh's new book. Saurabh and Anna Leuenberger, who is his coach. So that is that. Moving on to OTT, okay, which is the easier part. I spoke about coach and client conversation. I thought Stutz, and I've tweeted a lot about it, on Netflix was...
That's a Suchita's recommendation, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
so
I
good.
would think it is
Love it.
easily the single most important thing I've seen on Netflix since it began. Like, I can rave about it. I can rave and rave. As someone who's been in therapy like for a long time, struggled with a lot of issues, I thought this just hit it out of the park. I mean,
excellent.
the brutality and the honesty. I mean, my entire thing of Jonah Hill changed after that. There's some seriously uncomfortable stuff out there. They talk about it really casually. Anyway, so that's getting the Stutz part out of the way. I'm on reruns, by the way, because I saw Pathaan. I thought, let me just do Dawn. Let me do a Dawn reverse. So I just finished Dawn 2006. And I was man, 16, 17 years ago, where did Farhan Akhtar go?
Yeah.
Where did he go? The guy did...
he became an actor.
He did Dil Chahta in 2001.
So good.
He did Dawn in 2006. He did Lakshya somewhere in the middle, 2004.
Yeah.
Oh, 2023.
But he's finally directing though. At least he's finally directing again. After a long time, so we're hoping that brings him back. Because I agree with you. I miss Farhan Akhtar, the director and writer. The actor took over at some point and it just became a thing.
Yeah, and I kind of get how tough the times are. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get what will work. Whereas I think in that era, there was a lot more room for experimentation. I mean, Hrithik Roshan could just walk into a Laksh and just do it, and it still do well.
Yeah.
Dil Chahta Hai, I don't think anybody would have touched with a Bajpol, but look at what happened. And this happened, I think, in the same year as Lagan and Gadar. Can you ever think of Bollywood doing that?
Oh, look, Gadar 2 is coming. Just since you said Gadar 2 is almost ready. It's going to be releasing soon. Poster is out.
Is this with Sunny Deol?
Who else will be in Gadar 2?
I don't
to be
know.
fair, I actually saw Ghayal 2 and I thought it was good. So don't hold that, I kind of like that.
What is Ghayal? Oh, Varun has companionship.
I actually have a recommendation connected. So if you enjoyed Stutz, there's a show called Shrinking on Apple TV Plus.
Apple TV, Is this the one with Steve Carell?
Not Steve Carell. Yeah, this is I forget the actor.
Harrison Ford?
Harrison Ford is there. And the
Ah,
other
Yeah,
guy is
yeah,
so
there
good.
from,
Shrinking.
Jason
Shrinking.
Segel. Jason
Jason
Segel.
Segel. Yeah.
Jason Segel, yeah, and it's really cute. It's like I think
It's so nice.
2 episodes
It's
are
lovely.
out. It's really nice. It's
Yeah.
quite sweet. It's like on the same angle, but it's like a therapist going through like a really bad time in life, and he decides that I'm not just going to do it like how all the therapists do it. I'm actually going to take it one step ahead. So it's really cute and nice to
Yeah.
watch. That's my recommendation.
I haven't opened my Apple TV in a long time because I think I'm just stuck on Netflix. I'm also watching Fauda season 4. Ooh, outstanding. Like it's taken thrills to another level. Loved it. Totally loved it. I'm waiting for Last of Us to finish on Hotstar.
So you
I
can
want to
finally-
watch the entire binge on it.
Okay.
I've always been an Xbox guy, but every time, that I'm reminded, and this is a fight that I have with my kid because he's, he doesn't, there's Uncharted, Last of Us, and Gods of War. These are PS5 only.
And Red Dead
And-
Redemption.
Red is Xbox also. I don't think it's exclusive to PS5. These three are PS5 exclusives. So I would buy a
There's Red Dead
PS5 only for
Redemption as well. Yeah.
you
think
know, Red Dead. I think I've played that on my Xbox Game Pass. But these three would probably make me move to PS5. But only if my son agrees. Anyway, yeah. So I also want to see Fleischman in Trouble.
So
Heard a lot
good.
about it.
Excellent show. Love it.
Are all the episodes out?
Yep. Full season.
Okay. So I
It's-
think I should probably.
Nice binge watch.
I should go there. But yeah, that's the kind of wrap of stuff that I'm seeing. Movies, so I just watch and I forget. I remember this tweet about
Did you
how
enjoy Pathaan, bud? Did you enjoy Pathaan? Let me ask you.
I saw
the
it
important
twice.
question. Very good. I'm a second time going, so
God.
hopefully this week
I
again.
saw it first day, first show, and then I saw
Suchita,
it
you're in the
IMAX.
minority here. She has seen it 0 times.
I have
I've-
absolutely no problem with being in the minority.
I'm big on Shah Rukh Khan, so there's he could have just had like a 3-hour photo of him, and I'd still go to theater to watch that.
Same,
Oh
same.
my God.
Same.
Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk?
No,
What are your
I-
recommendations, Suchita?
What are my recommendations? I'm reading a really good book, man. I'm finally back to my reading mojo. It's called Hitmakers. It's by Derek Thompson, and it's a brilliant book on essentially how things become popular and viral. And he's given a lot of examples from like the Impressionist movement to songs and literature and this, that, and the other. So that's one recommendation. The other one I was actually going to recommend Shrinking. Thoroughly enjoyed the show. So good, so great to see Harrison Ford back in all of his glory. And obviously Jason Segel as well. Another show now that we're all binging on Netflix and evidently don't do anything else is Pamela Anderson's documentary.
Story. Yeah.
Which has been filmed by her sons. I think her sons have directed it or produced it or whatever. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's
It's
just
interesting, right? Because you had the Tommy and that series also that happened
and Tommy.
somewhere. Yeah, I didn't see
without her
that because
consent. Without her consent.
oh, it happened without her
was a-
consent, is it?
It was a great show, like very riveting and actually I thought it was a very balanced, pro Pamela kind of show.
I
But
thought the
she
star cast
didn't.
was very interesting. Yeah, I mean, you had
Yeah.
Sebastian Stan as Tommy Lee, and I don't know why they chose a British actress for Pamela. I mean, why couldn't they just go with an American? There's so many of them. But anyway,
But she was great, dude. She was fantastic.
Awesome,
No, but
awesome,
this
awesome.
documentary is lovely. For those of you who enjoy documentaries, and that wraps up my recommendation.
So yeah, I think that wraps up the show as well. Thank you so much, Anupam, for coming on. This has been great. We got to get you back on. I think we'll do an entire recommendations episode with you next time. That is what we're going to do. We're going to do an entire recommendations. If you guys want Anupam back for an entire recommendations episode, hit us all up on Twitter. Anupam is the OG tweeter, so you can hit him up and hit us up as well on this one. And thank you for coming on and running through so many things with us today.
oh, my pleasure to be here. Thanks guys. Thanks Varun. Thanks Suchita for having me. It's just so much
Thank
fun
you.
doing this. Yeah, I kind of knocked over my this, but thanks guys.
Thanks, Anupam.